Alright guys, Murph's here, and today we're going to be talking about home defense shotguns. Now I recently did a video about home defense rifles, and I kind of trash talked the home defense shotgun a lot during that. And that's not entirely fair because it's not exactly how I feel about the shotgun, though specifically in a home defense type situation, but it does still stand to reason for a lot of good and bad things about shotguns, but I thought we'd spend a little bit more time expanding on this idea. Now, something different that I'm going to do from the last video that I'm not going to do on this video is I'm not going to talk about the full concept all at once. So that video wound up being really long, and it was a huge download, and it took a lot of time to get it uploaded, and I had to make a lot of space for memory and all that kind of stuff. So I'm actually going to wind up breaking the home defense shotgun concept up into 3 parts. And today we're going to kind of break down home defense shotguns by type and talk about advantages and disadvantages all throughout. Now, however, I do want to start out with still outlining our advantages of home defense shotguns in case you haven't seen my video on home defense rifles, which if you haven't, you should totally check that out. Now, the traditional wisdom in general is that a shotgun is the best home defense weapon that you could possibly have. A lot of people will cite power and all this kind of stuff. They'll talk about just the sound of a pump action shotgun being racked is enough to send people running. Be that as it may, shotguns have advantages and disadvantages. So let's go ahead, let's talk about some advantages. First off, shotguns are powerful. Even a 410 bore shotgun is more powerful than the vast majority of handguns that you're bringing to a fight. And the important thing about any fight is that we stop the fight as soon as we can. Now, long arms are extremely crucial to that, and when we're talking about portable power in a long arm, a shotgun is a really good place to start at. Now, you get a ton of different load options with shotguns as well. There's a lot of versatility in the shotgun platform. You can run birdshot, buckshot, slugs, all kinds of different loads out of a single platform, which makes it very adaptable to whatever scenario that is that you're trying to use it for. And that transcends just even home defense. If you want to use your home defense gun to also hunt or sports shoot and all that kind of stuff, you can quickly adapt it, not just with ammunition, but also with modifications. Shotguns, being a popular defensive arm or fighting type weapon, have a lot of modifications that you can get for them out there to make them more adaptable to the end user. That versatility is really hard to overlook. Now also, the ease of operation of a shotgun. It does not take a lot of time to sit down with somebody, show them how to operate and load a shotgun, to make it to the point that they could set it in the corner of a room or place it into a safe of some sort, and then, should they need to, get access to that firearm and be able to operate it effectively for at least the capacity that it holds. That's a completely reasonable expectation, and it's a very difficult thing to overlook when we're talking about advantages in shotguns. Now, let's go ahead and let's talk about different types of shotguns and their advantages and disadvantages so we can get a better grasp of the overall concept of what we could use, because it's not a one-size-fits-all type solution. I don't like one-size-fits-all type solutions. So it's not like the only good shotgun out there for you is a pump action shotgun. So let's start with breech loading type shotguns. Now this covers both single shots and then also double barrels. So over-unders, side-by-sides. If you really want to get into some weird fringe stuff, I guess you could also say that we'll cover like the Chiapa 3-barreled shotgun, but I don't even know anyone who has one of those. So, breech loading shotguns. What's some advantages? You want to talk about simplicity? Here's simplicity. I depress a lever, the shotgun hinges open, I insert a shell, I close the shotgun. You know, on this model, you have to cock it. On a lot of your over-unders and your side-by-sides, you don't have to cock it. You turn the safety off and you send rounds downrange when you're ready. That's simple. That's really hard to mess up. You can literally teach anybody to use this. They're also extremely inexpensive. Single shot shotguns, you're looking around $100. Double barrel shotguns, you can get them new, depending on where you go, you can get them new for $325, $350. So you got simplicity, and it's also really cheap. So you can be armed, ready to defend your home without too much trouble. You know, some people really push that buy once, cry once type mentality. But guys, when you've got your priorities straight and the first thing you're concerned about is defending your family, it's okay to buy a $100 shotgun, even if it's with the intent that someday you might upgrade it to a $400 or $500 shotgun. You've got to get to that point of being able to afford the $400 or $500 shotgun. If you're concerned for your safety and you don't want to wait a couple of pay periods to be able to put the money together, go ahead and pick yourself up a stand-in until you're ready to get that new gun. The breech loading shotgun is fantastic in that regard. But there are a couple of issues with this type of shotgun, and that has to do with capacity. You've got 1 or 2 shells for the most part, unless you got the Chiapa with 3 shells, which will at least put you competitive with a lot of sporting firearms. But for the most part, you've got 1 or 2 shells, and that's how many rounds you've got to defend yourself with before you've got to do a kind of complicated reloading thing. Now, a lot of these guns are equipped with ejectors, so at the very least, once you pop the gun open, you don't have to fish the shell out. You can just cram in a new one and get back to work. That will cut down your reload time a little bit. However, you've still got to perform that reload, which means that you have to get a really small thing into the chamber under duress. Now, a lot of people might say, well, it doesn't matter if I end the fight with that one shot. But that's assuming that that one shot ends the fight. And I'm not even just talking about missing, as much as I'm talking about what if you have more than one assailant. Now, it used to be everyone thought that burglars would come in groups, you know, like singles or pairs. Now, with a lot of the footage that we're seeing from people's home cameras, we're seeing that's more like 3 to 5 guys. It's like we got a moving company coming in to steal your stuff. So, a single shot shotgun may not be the best way to defend yourself if you happen to decide, or if they happen to decide that they actually want to make a fight of it. Now, in theory, once shooting starts, most people should be running for the door. That's a reasonable expectation until you look at the current dynamic where we have a lot of civil unrest and stuff like that and a lot of nefarious people who are looking to cause trouble for the sake of causing trouble. You might need more than one shell, especially if you get yourself into a protracted gunfight. Something to take into consideration. Now, this shotgun is a Pardner 10 gauge turkey gun. 100% would not recommend, because something that you'll run into with your single shots and your double barrels is that when you put heavier loads in them, the recoil becomes very heavy. And it might be difficult for you, because I'll tell you right now, I really don't enjoy shooting this 10 gauge. I only put a couple of shells through this thing anytime I take it out, and I definitely would not want to use it to defend my life. So if this is difficult for me to want to defend myself with, it would be a difficult expectation that, say, an elderly person or someone very young or maybe someone with a lighter build would want to defend themselves with it. That's a reasonable expectation for them to not want to do this. Now, you could get this in a 410. Now, the problem with any time we shrink gauge, we also shrink effectiveness and power, but you can get effective 410 bore self-defense cartridges out there. I would caution you, though, to avoid a lot of the gimmicky type ammunition. Some of it's just not that effective. But something like a 410 slug, it'll do the work, and it'll put somebody down, no problem. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about are pump action shotguns. Now, pump action shotguns are my most recommended form of self-defense shotgun. This is my preferred. I like the simplicity and reliability of pump action shotguns. Of course, you can get them in any variety of capacities and gauges and all that kind of stuff. This is a 5-shot capacity. You can get them with extended magazines out past 9 rounds. And there's a lot of adaptability in that. You have way more rounds on board so that when those 5 guys break into your house, you can reliably engage all of them. If you have even more than that, if you're going to get yourself into a protracted gunfight, 8 rounds is going to beat 1 round 100% of the time, right? Now, one of the disadvantages to running a pump action shotgun is going to come into actual manipulations. So, like I said before, you load this gun up and you set it in the corner, and literally anyone in the household with the minimum amount of training ought to be able to operate it for the duration of the magazine tube. The problem becomes of when you actually have to start doing firearms manipulations like reloads, or perhaps clearing a malfunction, because though pump action shotguns are extremely reliable, they do sometimes jam if the user's not operating the weapon properly, or sometimes even mechanical failure occurs. It's far more likely that when a pump action shotgun jams, though, that it's because of user error. But if we're talking about undertrained people, user error is a very viable concern. Now, once again, we're talking about manipulating very, small cartridges, which, as far as cartridges are concerned, shotgun shells are quite large, but you are talking about manipulating small items into a magazine tube, into a specific area that you have to load up and then operate afterwards. Loading, malfunctions clearing, and then, worst case scenario, if you get injured and you have to operate this shotgun with your weak side or without all of your limbs functioning properly, that makes this gun a lot harder to work. That's an issue with shotguns in general and pump action specifically, because they are an example of what I call simple complexity. Sometimes things are so simple it's difficult to work with. The pump action shotguns, all the different types of shotguns really, are indicative of that fact. You can have something so simple that it's difficult. It's just like nobody's advocating for using single action cowboy style revolvers for self-defense. Those are simple guns to operate, but they're so simple it's complicated to reload and manipulate and all that kind of stuff that they're no longer a viable weapon system. Now, somewhere around here, I have an example of a semi-automatic shotgun, but, oh wait, here it is. Sorry guys. It's camo, it's hard to see. But semi-automatic shotguns are the next style of shotgun that are very popular for use. And when it comes to actually having to get into a fight, the semi-automatic shotgun has a lot of advantages. You have a lot of the same capacity advantages as the pump action shotgun, but you can also get through that magazine faster, which of course is a good and a bad thing. If you're out there just wasting rounds, it's not helping anything, but that's true of a pump action shotgun, a single shot, or a semi-automatic. But it also allows you to get faster follow-up shots. It allows you to transition more naturally across targets because you don't have to manipulate a whole other part of the gun. All you have to do is pull the trigger. Now, when it comes to loading and malfunction clearance and all that kind of stuff, these are just as complicated as pump action shotguns, except for magazine fed shotguns, which we'll talk about specifically here in a second. But this shotgun loads just like a pump action shotgun does, with a little added issue of, specifically on this Remington 1187, there's a button that I have to make sure I depress every time I load a shell. Other shotguns have variations of that same kind of concept. Or say, when I rack this back, I may have to release the bolt manually the first time. That is some peculiarities, wow, I can't talk right now. Peculiarities of these shotguns that might make it more difficult to train somebody, and definitely might make them more difficult to operate under duress. However, if you can get those things down, then it's very easy to run this gun and run it effectively. But another problem that you run into, specifically with semi-automatic shotguns, is ammo finickiness. It's a technical term, go ahead and write that down. These guns are ammo sensitive. If you try to run lighter loads out of a lot of semi-automatic shotguns, you may have malfunction issues. Every semi-automatic shotgun that I know of has rounds that it likes and rounds that it hates. And you've got to spend some time on the range to make sure that you know the difference. And that's a pretty big issue to me because I like to have ammo transparency across my weapons systems. I don't like having ammo finicky guns lying around. Now, Remington 1100s and 1187s are not nearly as bad about it, but a lot of your Benellis and stuff like that, they can have a tendency to be a little picky on what ammunition they like to operate with. Now, I said I would talk about magazine-fed shotguns, and you will notice that I do not have an example of a magazine-fed shotgun. There's not even one hiding in camouflage behind me or something like that. I do not like magazine-fed shotguns at all. I've not seen a single magazine-fed shotgun that is 100% reliable and imbues me with the necessary trust that I require of a home defense gun. And if you think I'm being unfair, what I want you to really think about for a minute, and I've mentioned this before, spring tension against an unyielding block on a plastic shotgun shell. Now, what does that mean? Well, magazines have feed lips and they have springs. Springs are always exerting pressure on things. That's how springs work. So you've got soft plastic shells that have a spring pushing them up into a feed lip. Those shells are going to deform. So that way, when it comes time for you to rack that first shell into your shotgun, into your magazine-fed semi-automatic, or even they make pump-action guns, pump-action magazine-fed guns as well. When you go to rack that first shell in there, you very likely could have a malfunction. And this is not the time that you want to have malfunctions. And it could be that whole magazine. And when you consider that the vast majority of the time a home defense shotgun is going to sit around loaded, not being shot, there's a pretty good chance that your shotgun shells are going to be deformed when you need them. Now, for competition shooters and stuff like that, magazine-fed shotguns make a lot more sense because the magazines don't stay loaded that long. They're in a competition. If their magazines are loaded for too long, they're doing something wrong. So that's my issue with magazine-fed shotguns. That's why I do not advocate for their use in home defense scenarios, and I own none. They're not even popping up on my radar. It's not a thing that I've even considered owning. All right, guys, so that's breaking it down by type. I would like to spend a little bit of time to kind of cover the disadvantages of shotguns as an overall concept more thoroughly and centralized. Shotguns are effective fight stoppers because they are powerful. And you can scale the power to the user. You know, maybe not everyone in your household can withstand the recoil of a 12 gauge shotgun. Maybe if you step it down to 20 gauge, you'll have a better situation for that person actually shooting it. They'll be able to manage that recoil and use it. But we run into a couple of other disadvantages. Like I mentioned before, when we shrink gauge, we also shrink effect. Now, that goes in two different directions there when we talk about the biggest disadvantage of using firearms for home defense in general, and that is overpenetration. We never evade overpenetration, no matter what we do. Handguns will have overpenetration type issues. Rifles definitely have overpenetration issues. And shotguns with actual defensive loads in them will have overpenetration issues. If you're talking about buckshot at normal combat distances, buckshot will overpenetrate. And if you're within range of using a shotgun slug, you are within range of overpenetration. That's just the reality of a shotgun slug. It's that powerful that as long as you connect with the target, it's going to punch all the way through it. Now, there are a couple things that you can do to change that balance. Now, double-aught buckshot at close range may overpenetrate, but switching to number 4 buckshot may help you change that overpenetration dynamic in your favor. 20 gauge number 4 buckshot will actually not only have less likely of a chance to overpenetrate the target, but also if you hit, say, drywall or something like that, you'll have less of an overpenetration issue with number 4 buckshot. So now, if you're concerned about potentially missing your target and accidentally shooting a family member, you can try to work with that dynamic, though I do implore you to do research, and if you can, test it on your own. Not live testing, don't actually shoot at your children on the other side of a wall, but maybe set up some drywall somewhere and see how much of an overpenetration risk you might have. Simple complexity. You can't get away from it. Yes, shotguns are simple to set up and set aside, but when it comes to reloading under duress or performing malfunction clearance or weak side shooting, shotguns have quite a few disadvantages. Now, semi-automatic shotguns help out in the weak side shooting in that you have less parts that you have to manipulate in order to be able to keep the gun into the fight. So you could potentially still use an injured limb just to prop up the gun and not have to run the slide like on this JC Higgins pump action shotgun. But none of that matters if you don't get training. Now, a lot of people don't really spend a lot of time concerning themselves with shotgun training. But if you want to talk about efficiently reloading and efficiently functioning the shotgun in self-defense type situations, I greatly implore you to go and get training on this matter. Don't just leave it up to fate. Don't go to the range and think you're practicing good habits. Actually go and get some instruction in proper shotgun handling techniques. The shotgun has a lot of advantages that cannot be understated, for sure. It might feel like I'm still attacking the shotgun, but I'm attacking the shotgun because the vast majority of people out there who are trusting in home defense shotguns do not seek the training to actually run them effectively. And it would be far easier, especially since a lot of ranges are kind of iffy on allowing you to be able to run shotguns in a more tactical type sense. It might be easier for someone to run a pistol or a rifle for home defense than it will be for a shotgun, at least from a proficiency standpoint. And ultimately, guys, if we're not training and making ourselves actually viable with our weapon systems, we're not doing anything to help ourselves out. All right, so that's what I got for this section. The other two parts will be coming eventually. I don't want to give you guys a timeline and then not meet it. So until next time, guys, have a good day.